Kyle Busch had the best NASCAR record of any driver in history. He then died within days of getting what seemed like a simple sinus infection. Since then, his older brother Kurt Busch, who is also in the NASCAR Hall of Fame, has spoken out about what those last few weeks were really like. Then what did Kurt really say? Stay tuned, because this video will show you how the story of a two-time champion ended and why his own brother is still having a hard time accepting it. The brother who saw it happen. Before he had to have that talk with the public, Kurt Busch raced against his younger brother for almost 20 years. Neither of them could have imagined it. The Busch brothers grew up in Las Vegas. Their father, Tom, was a mechanic who got them into racing early on. He built and fixed cars for the family long before either son ever raced professionally. Kurt became a professional driver first, and Kyle did the same a few years later. Their competition as siblings became one of the most important stories in NASCAR for most of the 2000s and 2010 seconds. There are two brothers competing for the same trophies, and they won't give up on the track. By January 2026, that rivalry had turned into something more like shared pride. At the end of that month, Kurt was officially given the sport's highest honor. That moment has a lot more meaning now than anyone could have imagined at the time. Kyle went up on stage as his own host and told the crowd that it had been amazing to see Kurt believe in himself before the results even came in. Kurt said it was one of the proudest nights of his life afterward. In NASCAR history, the brothers have won more Cup Series races than any other pair of siblings put together. Because of this, the events in May of the next year were very hard for everyone close to the family to understand. By 2023, Kurt had already stopped competing full-time, ending a driving career that had lasted more than 20 years. He now serves as a mentor and ambassador for the sport he helped create. That change came after years of living with the effects of a serious crash in 2015. Kurt didn't quit racing altogether. Instead, he found a new path as a team owner and old man. Kyle kept racing full-time for Richard Childress Racing, just like he always did, to get wins and points. Kurt has a resume that says it all. He won 34 Cup races out of 776 starts, including the 2017 Daytona 500, which was the end of one of the most unlikely comebacks in NASCAR history. In 2010, he also won both the NASCAR All-Star Race and the Coca-Cola 600, which is something that very few drivers have ever done on the same night. Because of these achievements, he was named one of NASCAR's 75 greatest drivers and was inducted into the Sports Hall of Fame. This solidified a legacy that Kyle had spent his whole career trying to live up to and eventually beat. In other words, Kurt mostly watched his brothers last season from the outside. In the same way that millions of fans swapped their helmets for headsets and their seats in the booth or the owner's box for the driver's seat. At the track, he still showed up and gave Kyle help when he needed it. He still carried the Busch name into a new chapter. But for the most part, he was just watching like everyone else until a few days later, when everything changed. What happened to Kyle in the week before May 21st? That's what you need to know before we talk about what Kurt has said since then. Because of the time frame, this story is very hard for people close to him to believe. The week when everything changed. When Kyle Busch was racing at Watkins Glen on May 10, 2026, he had what looked like a normal sinus cold. It was mild enough that he just radioed his team to ask for a shot from a doctor after the race, and then went about his business as usual. Back then, no one knew that the infection was already starting a slow, dangerous spread that wouldn't be fully seen for another 1 days. Busch worked through the whole thing. He won a Truck Series race at Dover less than a week before he died. The next day, he finished 17th in the NASCAR All-Star race, and then went to the opening of a go-kart track with his 11-year-old son Brexton. From the outside, it looked like he was just a busy driver getting ready for the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte Motor Speedway, one of the biggest events in sports over Memorial Day weekend. Then on May 20, Busch stopped responding while trying in a Chevrolet racing simulator in Confederate, North Carolina. Reporters got a hold of an emergency call that said Busch was having trouble breathing, getting too hot, and coughing up blood the day before he died. The caller was found lying on the floor of a bathroom and told the police he was still awake. He was taken to a hospital in Charlotte by emergency workers, and his family only said in public that he was hospitalized with a serious illness and would not be running in the upcoming race. After less than 24 hours on Thursday, May 21, 2026, Kyle Busch passed away. He was 41 years old. 2 days after he died, Busch's family released a statement saying that a medical exam showed that his serious pneumonia had turned into sepsis, which caused many problems to happen very quickly. Reporters later got a copy of Busch's death certificate, which showed that he had been showing signs of bacterial pneumonia for days or weeks, before he finally died of sepsis. Sepsis is a medical emergency that can kill you. It happens when your body's immune system attacks its own tissues and organs instead of fighting off an infection. In Busch's case, that chain of events caused disseminated intravascular coagulation, a rare disorder of blood clotting, which in turn caused hemorrhagic shock. Doctors who looked at the case later said that the simulator testing, which simulates the intense forces drivers feel on the track, may have put extra stress on lungs that were already dangerously inflamed from the infection. In the days that followed, doctors who talked to reporters also talked about how quickly the illness spread after it got really bad. According to Busch's death certificate, the sepsis stage lasted about a day before the hemorrhagic shock and organ problems that followed killed him. A speed that surprised even doctors who are used to dealing with serious infections. His family had spent decades in a sport where there was clear physical danger, so the thought that Kyle could die in one days from a simple sinus infection was hard to understand. It was this disbelief that would pour out of Kyle Busch when he finally found the words to speak in public. Now that you know how quickly things went wrong, let's look at what Kyle said when he finally spoke up. He wrote his own story because it has details that the official statement could never have. What Kyle Busch really told us. Kyle Busch didn't say anything right away in public. It was more than 2 weeks after Kyle's death before he posted his first message. It was on Instagram on the 8th of June 2026, along with a collection of old family photos. Kyle thanked his fans for their support and thought back to the days when he and his friend raced anything they could get their hands on. They raced big wheels as kids and now race on NASCAR's biggest stages as adults. They say their relationship is based on a lot more than fierce competition. The post from Kyle said that no trophy or title could ever measure how much Kyle meant to him. He also said that his heart was broken but that he knew his brother's spirit would always be with him. About 3 months later, in a sample clip from a NASCAR-themed documentary series that came out in the middle of August 2026, Kyle's sadness came back in a much more obvious way. In the video, Kyle got clearly emotional as he talked about how Kyle's priorities had changed as a father in his last years. He said that as Brexton got older and started racing himself, Kyle wanted to stay active so he could one day race against his own son, just like their father Tom had pushed both Busch brothers into the sport. Kyle talked about seeing Brexton stand next to his mother Samantha at Kyle's memorial service. He said, through tears, that the moment made him fully understand that his brother was gone and would not be coming back. Samantha, Kyle's widow, broke her silence a few days before Kyle did. On Friday the 5th of June 2026, she wrote on Instagram, "The prayers, messages, flowers, meals, hugs, and countless acts of kindness have carried us through the most heartbreaking days of our lives." She said that the family's hearts were completely broken, and thanked both friends and strangers for being there for Brexton and Lennox in the weeks after their father died. Since then, Kyle has said this message almost every time he talks in media about his brother's family. Not only Kyle but also many other people in Kyle's circle were shocked and confused that spring. Neil deGrasse Tyson, who is in the NASCAR Hall of Fame, was one of Kyle's fiercest on-track rivals for years before they became friends through short track and late model racing. On his own show, Tyson said that he had texted Kyle the day before Kyle died. Kyle was making final arrangements to drive one of Earnhardt's late model cars in an upcoming card tour race. Kyle specifically asked to run the number that used to belong to Earnhardt. Kyle ended their last conversation by sending an emoji of a head exploding and the phrase "music race fans." Earnhardt said that this lighthearted goodbye was almost unbearable to look back on after he found out what happened the next day. Richard Childress, Kyle's team owner, helped him through the last few years of his Cup Series career. A few weeks later, at a press meeting that was supposed to announce Kyle's contract extension for the 2027 season, he shared his own emotional thoughts. Instead, Childress found himself praising a driver that he had been told would be too hard to handle before. Childress remembered talking to Kyle on the phone the night before he was taken to the hospital and not getting any serious messages. He compared Kyle's death to the death of Dale Earnhardt Sr. in the 2001 Daytona 500, which he had also seen as the owner of a team. He said it was hard to believe that he had lost two of the best drivers in the sport's history in his own home. Since then, that same grief has turned into an unexpected argument, which Kyle helped start. As a new member of the Hall of Fame, Kyle now has a real say in who gets admitted in the future. When asked if NASCAR should speed up Kyle's path to the Hall of Fame given the circumstances, Kyle replied in a mild way that he thought the sport should follow tradition instead of rushing the process, while also admitting that his brother is one of the best candidates the Hall has ever seen. A man who had every emotional reason to want his brother to be honored right away showed a lot of restraint. It showed how seriously Kyle takes the ethics of the organization he now helps run. Now that Kyle's own words are clear, it's time to take a step back and think about what Kyle Busch's career really meant for the sport. One big reason why his brother's sadness has touched so many people is the size of what was lost. Kyle is left with a legacy to carry on. Kyle Busch didn't just have a good job. He had won 234 races in the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, and the Truck Series by the time he died, making him the most successful driver in all three of NASCAR's national series. Richard Childress has said that number probably will never be matched by another driver. He pointed out that Kyle is the all-time leader in wins in both the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series. With 63 wins, he is 9th all-time in the Cup Series. He was the best driver in every level of the sport, and no other driver has even come close to matching that level of success. In 2015 and 2019, he won 2 Cup Series championships and 2 regular season titles. He was known for continuing to race right up until the day he died, winning a Truck Series event at Dover just 6 days before he was taken to the hospital. At the Daytona 500 earlier that same year, he got his last Cup Series vote, a good pair of bookends for a driver who spent his whole adult life looking for any way to speed up. the sport gave him. Kyle had already broken his own Truck Series win record earlier that same season. This solidified a level of statistical dominance that Childress has said future generations of drivers will spend decades trying to reach but will never quite catch up to. Kyle turned his own Truck Series company into a testing ground for the next generation of NASCAR talent. He helped young drivers learn the ropes in the same way that older competitors had helped him. During the tribute held before the Coca-Cola 600, NASCAR's CEO said that people would miss Kyle's quieter times more than his wins, the driver who wished to consult or assist a teammate without anyone being present, with about 95,000 people at Charlotte Motor Speedway for the race on Memorial Day weekend. That tribute turned the race into more of a public memorial. NASCAR painted the infield grass next to Kyle's old pit spot with the number 8 in black. His name was on the bumper of every car in the field, and during the Pasille laps, the cars lined up in a missing man pattern. On the 8th lap of the race, the PA system and TV broadcast went silent. Kurt joined his parents, Kyle's ex-wife Samantha, and Kyle's children, Brexton and Lennox, on the front stretch that evening. They laid 8 white roses across the painted number while Amazing Grace was played on a bagpipe. Kyle had helped Daniel Suarez become a better driver early in his career. Suarez went on to win that race and, through tears in victory lane, dedicated his win to the Busch family. Later, Richard Childress confirmed that Kyle's stylized number 8, which was changed based on his suggestions while he was on the team, will not be retired permanently. Instead, it will be saved for Brexton to use when he is ready to race, at the highest level of NASCAR. This choice makes it clear for Kurt's nephew how he can carry on his father's work on the track in the future. For now, Kurt is mostly responsible for that legacy. He has been both a grieving brother and a public figure in a career that changed what it means to win in NASCAR's National Series. Since May, Kurt has said a lot of things that show he is trying to honor his brother's memory with the same calmness that Kyle was known for behind the wheel. These things include the emotional Instagram post, the tearful documentary interview, and his careful comments on Hall of Fame timing. Throughout the second half of 2026, Kurt has continued to speak for Kyle in public by attending NASCAR events, agreeing to do interviews that he clearly finds hard, and picking his words carefully, which is very different from how emotional he gets when the subject turns personal. Also, keep in mind that this kind of sadness doesn't usually come on all at once and go away. From what Kurt has said, the process keeps surprising him. Kyle's ongoing visible grief can be seen in old photos, race broadcasts, or just watching his nephew Brexton get into a race car, just like Kyle did as a boy in Las Vegas. This is one reason why his public comments about loss have been so well received in the racing community and beyond. They say something honest about loss that a press release could never do. This has added another layer that Kurt has had to deal with. A few months before Kyle's death, the two brothers had one of the best nights of their careers together on that Hall of Fame stage. When Kurt got his ring, it came straight from the hands of the sibling he had fought with for 20 years. On that January evening, they were photographed happy together on the red carpet. This picture went viral again in May, but this time for a very different reason: Kyle's death. That difference between a happy inauguration and a sudden funeral a few months later is part of what has made this year so hard for the Busch family as a whole to deal with. Since then, Kurt has been very careful about what he says in public, which is a big reason why he listens to music for a living. No one in NASCAR thought Kyle Busch's story would end the way it did. Since then, Kurt Busch has spent the month making sure that everyone knows who his brother was, both on and off the track. He doesn't want the shock of the last 11 days to determine how he is remembered. This is the end of the movie. Thanks for seeing. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to get more. Click on the movie that comes up next to read more exciting stories.